Now we find the days of Hajj. If the person has the means, the wealth, the health, etc., they should go and try and perform the Hajj, not towards the end of their life, but towards a prime time, the young days. The second thing that he mentions, Imam Nawawi in Sharh this hadith, is a person should have what's known as literally qadmul ghayb, swallow one's anger, to be able to control oneself when they lose their anger. Many young people begin to lash out, cannot control themselves. The third thing he mentions, al-afu, to pardon mankind. It's also a great characteristic that a person forgives people. Thus the Prophet Muhammad, when he came back into Mecca, if you read the seerah whereby he's victorious, and he had every right to walk in, strut into Medina, so into Mecca, showing in a manner of pride and dominance. But yet the Prophet Muhammad enters into Mecca, resting his blessed neck on the neck of his riding beast, as a form of humility and respect of how he's coming back into Mecca to conquer it as the ultimate ruler. And he says to his followers and the non-Muslims, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين. The end of Surah Yusuf, the 12th chapter of the Quran. No blame upon you today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive and pardon all of you the atrocities that they committed upon Him. The fourth characteristic of the path to paradise which concerns us today is as-sabr an ash-shahawat, is to be patient to stay away from temptations and desires. This has been written centuries ago. So at that time there were many temptations that the ulama recognized, and even today just the form of the temptations may be slightly different, but the essence is the same. قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ. Say that the good pure substances and the evil substances are not the same. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ. Even though that which is impure may startle you. Sometimes the dunya around you startles the person, the billboards, the media. It allures the individual. But the believer sees straight through it. And remember this ayat of the Quran, that which is pure and that which is filthy cannot be the same. Filth may at times mesmerize your eyesight, may make you feel attracted towards it, but the real believer spots this. Unfortunately, many of our youth, they have a presumption and understanding that I do whatever I want to do, then at a later stage I'll become a good individual. Many people, they know about Islam now. More and more you find there's much awareness. But people want to live the slogans of what we find of enjoying yourself, your only young ones, do whatever you can, enjoy your life, live life to the fullest. And then later on we become good individuals. Once again, the Quran has documented this. The Quran has documented this type of mentality and this psychological concept of understanding of life. If you go back to Surah Yusuf, the beginning of the 12th chapter of the Quran, you find the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, who is a side point we're going to come, how he controlled himself as a young individual. When they decided to place him inside the well, they said, after we do this evil action, وَتَكُونُ مِن بَعْدِهِ قَوْمًا صَالِحِينَ. After we do this evil action, we're going to come back and become righteous individuals. The same psychological concept exists in many young Muslims, that later on I'll become a good individual. Later on when I get to the age of 40, later on when I perform Hajj, or maybe when I mature more. That's a dangerous understanding to have of life, because no individual knows whether they're going to reach that age or not. So this type of thought and perception should be taken out of our mind. That the prime time of the life of an individual is whilst they're young, and that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from the young individual, to be focused towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they had their temptations. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. Then the soul naturally calls towards desires and temptations, except for that soul which is suppressed by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yusuf alayhi salam Prime example, Shatrul Jamal, one half of beauty has been given to him. The whole scenario is laid out for him to enter into that evil action. But he overrode that, take himself out of those temptations, that desires, that lust that all of us have within us, to become that fine individual. And that's what ulama begin to discuss about young people. When do they reach that prime level? Is it after committing a sin and then becoming a good individual? Or is it never going towards sin? And a scholarly discussion begins to take place about who is a finer individual. But either way, as long as the person recognizes their mistake and rectifies themselves, that is a path of success. The hadith, كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمْ خَطَّاء وَخَيْرُ الْخَطَّائِينَ التَّوَّابُونَ. All of the children of Adam, they err. They make mistakes. The best of those individuals who make the mistakes are those who swiftly repent back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's you find that some of the youth, they reach a level of spirituality which makes them like angels in the sense of their obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thus you find this hadith, this statement is going back, وَعَنْ أُقْبَ مَرْفُوعًا إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَا يُعْجَبُ لِلشَّابِ لَا صَبْوَةً لَهُ. Indeed, your Lord startles at a young individual that has no crookedness, has no temptation within themselves, and thus you find a mail ila al-hawa, has no inclination to go towards their lust and their desires. This isnad, this hadith has been checked with Jawadahu Shaykh Nasiruddin al-Albani rahmatullahi alayhi. Likewise, find Imam al-Mannawi in Fayd al-Qadir mentions that why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala startles at a young individual who does not go towards temptations and desires and preserves and protects themselves? Because you find قوة عزيمة is في البعد عن الشر, the strong desire of this individual to stay away from evil. وهذا نادر. This is very, very rare that a young person tries to stay away from haram. So because this is a rare individual who's trying to stay away from haram, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is startled at that individual, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows from the beginning to the end. So this form of sighat ta'ajjub is a form of praise, praising this type of young individual who does not want to enter into any form of haram, but wants to live a pure and orthodox and a pristine way of life. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult. There's no doubt about it. To live a pure life is going to be difficult, especially when all the temptations find around us. But obviously, the reward is immense. If we go back to probably the most famous hadith, talking about the reward of a young individual, سَبْعَةٌ يُظِلُّهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظِلِّهِ يَوْمَ لَا ظِلَّ إِلَّا ظِلُّهُ. 7 will be under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when there will be no shade. First we find Imam Adil, a just Imam. Secondly, الشاب نشأ في عبادة الله سبحانه وتعالى, a young person who spent their life worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَرَجُلٌ قَلْبُهُ مُعَلَّقٌ بِالْمَسَاجِدِ, a man whose heart is attached to the masjid. Likewise we find وَرَجُلَانِ تَحَابَّ فِي اللَّهِ اجْتَمَعَ عَلَيْهِ وَافْتَرَقَ عَلَيْهِ, 2 people who love each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They come together for that and they separate upon that. And just to complete the hadith, another interesting point. وَرَجُلٌ دَعَتْهُ إِمْرَأَةٌ, a man that a beautiful woman, ذات منصب, of lineage, of purity, of beauty, proposes or exposes herself to this individual, and he says, إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهِ, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise you find وَرَجُلٌ تَصَدَّقَ بِصَدَقَةٍ, a man who spends his charity in secrecy, that the right hand doesn't know, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand has spent. And likewise, just to complete the hadith, وَرَجُلٌ ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَالِيًا فَفَاضَتْ عَيْنَاهُ, a person in solitude remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala till his eyes begin to shed tears. These are the 7 categories or types of individuals who will be under the